Boom. All right. We are live on Facebook and on Instagram. And today's topic is how much protein? Hey, Chris, good to see you here. So you guys might notice I have a different backdrop here. I'm actually at a friend's house, Anne-Marie Flynn's place, because today we are doing the Ground Zero Clinic, which is a clinic for first-time competitors. So we're over in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, and that's going to start at 1 o'clock. You may have some people walking behind me here, coming up and using the bathroom and stuff, because we're actually downstairs with this stuff. So. So this is a really important topic, and I think it's one that a lot of people don't maybe pay close enough attention to, and that's how much protein do you need to eat in a day in order to make muscle gains. Oh my gosh, it's live downstairs. Hopefully you guys don't hear that. So of course this is Facebook Live, so if you have any questions at all, please feel free to ask them. We're going to get underway here in about 30 seconds. I'm going to put these headphones on to block out some of the noise from downstairs. All right, there we go. All right, guys, so protein. The Greeks came up with this term for this particular molecule or string of amino acids. And basically, pro is primary. So even the Greeks knew that protein was, of the macronutrients, probably the most important one. So that's why we've got a show here dedicated to protein all by itself. So what is protein? Guys, protein, I'm going to do this on all different levels. So for some of you guys, you're just going to roll your eyes and go, of course. And then for some of you, you may be new, you may be beginners, you may not know even what protein necessarily is or what foods contain protein. So when you think of protein, it's basically, your meats, you've got whey protein, eggs, you've got other different types of protein powders, casein, you got milk, which is actually made up more of carbohydrates than actual protein, but a lot of people consider milk protein. You've got protein sources in different vegetables, and legumes and things like that, beans. Soy is a protein. There's many different protein sources, but mostly when we refer to protein, we're thinking about meats, because those are the highest quality protein that you're going to get. Meats, eggs, whey protein, those sort of things. When you get into the vegetables and stuff like that, you're actually dealing with the other macros actually outweighing the protein, so you're going to get more fats and more carbs. So this is why we kind of think of protein as mostly those foods that contain the majority of the macronutrients are from protein, and that's how I like to group them together. So you can, yeah, see, I knew that was going to happen. It's going to happen a bunch of times. So when we're thinking about protein, we're going to think about mostly just those protein-containing foods that have the majority of their calories coming from protein. So I named off a bunch of those. We have fatty proteins. Okay, so those are proteins that are going to contain fats like good fats like salmon, red meats, etc. And then we have your lean sources of protein, like your chicken breast, your turkey breast, your many other types of the white fishes, for example, whey protein, another lean source of protein. Now, what's protein made up of? They're made up of amino acids. Amino acids connected by peptide bonds. And when we digest proteins, these peptide bonds are released, and then we absorb the amino acids. So it breaks down to basically amino acids. Carbohydrates basically break down into sugar. Proteins basically break down to amino acids. So depending on how quickly your body's able to break down those that protein source is how quickly and easily it's digested. So we talk about sometimes some slow digesting proteins versus some very fast digesting proteins. Hey, Chris on Instagram, how you doing? So anytime you guys have some questions about anything, please just feel free to ask. Phil's going to pop up a question here right now, asking about did your protein intake stay consistent even when other? Yeah, pretty much. You know, when we're building for hey Dana, when we're building for muscle mass, our protein is going to about stay the same. And I'm going to give you guys the actual numbers because that's the main reason why you guys are here. That's the name of this particular episode, is how much protein do I actually need? So hopefully I've described to you guys what protein is, some of the sources of protein that you get. And so now let's get right down to the nitty gritty. How much protein do we actually need to eat on a daily basis? So I'm going to show you guys, well, actually, I'll tell you first, and then I'll show you this little diagram. So basically, it's generally regarded that what we need to aim for when we're building muscle mass or trying to retain muscle mass is about 1 gram of protein to 1.5 grams of protein per pound of lean body mass. So that doesn't include our fat mass. That's just our lean body mass. So we can do some simple calculations and figure that out. So I've got a little picture here. Hopefully you guys can see it. It's going to be, might be, well, what it is, and I can send this to you. If any of you guys want to see what this diagram is, it's basically a body fat percentage diagram, and it gives some nice pictures of women and guys. So you don't have to go in necessarily and get your body fat tested. Or, you know, I mean, that's so off anyway. It doesn't really matter. So you can kind of go by this diagram and figure out roughly what your body fat percentage is. So most guys are going to be anywhere from 12 to 25% body fat. Most women anywhere from 20 to 35% body fat. So what you want to do is you want to get on the scale, see how much you weigh, and then minus the percentage of body fat. So if you're 20% body fat, then you take your weight, multiply it by 0.2, subtract that number from your actual weight, and that's going to be your lean body mass. Hey, Rick, thanks for joining me. So that's how you figure out your lean body mass. And then easily enough, you just multiply that by 1, which is simple, or 1.5, and that will give you your daily protein requirement for the day. Now, one thing I didn't mention is that protein turns over in our bodies. We don't have any real storage mechanism for protein. And this is why it's important to eat protein evenly throughout the day, every 3 to 4 hours. And this is why we do this feeding as people that are into fitness or bodybuilding. We eat we're really anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. But 3 to 4 hours is generally the norm. And the reason why we do this is to give our body a supply of amino acids on a regular basis so that our body doesn't have to dip into its own stores and start breaking down muscle tissue. So remember, you want to eat every 3 to 4 hours. And now that you know how many grams of protein you need in a day, you divide that number evenly among your 4 to 5 meals. So it's pretty simple, right? Once you have this game plan in place, then you can figure it out. Now, how do I know if I need to go more towards the 1.5 grams or whether I need to go, I can get away with just the 1 gram per pound? Really, it's an individual basis, and you're going to have to experiment a little bit. Generally, I find that the people that can eat higher carbohydrates tend to need just a little bit less protein than the people that do much better on a low carbohydrate diet. So that'll give you somewhere to start from anyway. So if you're a person like me who does much better on protein and fats, then probably going to aim a little bit higher in the higher range towards that 1.5 gram. Where if you're someone that can eat, 300 grams of carbs a day and not get fat, you could probably get away with a little bit closer to that 1 gram per pound of lean body mass. So if you guys have any questions for me, please feel free to ask. So let's talk about protein sources again. We talked about meats being one. So I highly recommend that when you eat your meats that you get grass-fed. You guys know this probably already. For me, I'm going to recommend always grass-fed, wild, pesticide-free, et cetera, whenever possible. And the reason why, of course, is because anything with fat in it especially, that's where toxins and things are stored. So any of these animals that are fed penicillin or medicines, they're actually going to be stored in the fat. And when you eat that, you're going to store them in your own fat as well. And over time, that could cause some illness. So always eat as clean as possible. Now, someone might say, "Hey, Chris, I did the math or worked it out. I'm going to be eating, 6 or 7 or even 8 ounces of protein per meal. That's a lot of meat, and I really don't feel comfortable eating that much meat. Do you have any tricks for me? Should I instead, drink a lot of shakes throughout the day? What else can I do?" Well, basically, here's my answer for you. The answer is not shakes. Okay, we do make a really good whey protein. It's a New Zealand whey. It's called military whey. And but I like using whey protein just like I do my other proteins, which is basically to cycle through my proteins so that my body doesn't become accustomed to any one single source. So we'll put a pin in that for now, and we'll get back to how can I increase my protein intake without having to eat so much meat. And the most simple way is by taking essential amino acids. And we have a product that's actually 3 times more anabolic than regular essential amino acids. It's called AMO8. And I'm going to tell you guys how to use AMO8 so that you don't have to eat quite as much meat or quite as much food even. And the secret is that 5 grams of this product, 1 scoop, is equal to 15 grams of protein. So you can see if I was to drink just 2 little scoops of this a day, that's 10 grams. That's an extra 30 grams of protein. Now, how does that make sense? How can this be 30 grams of protein in only 2 scoops, 2 little 5-gram scoops? Well, the answer is because as I mentioned to you guys before, protein is made up of amino acids, and these amino acids are called essential and non-essential amino acids, right? So if we take essential, meaning we have to get them from our diet, non-essential meaning we don't have to get them from our diet. We can create these on our own. So if you strip away those non-essentials, what are you left with? You're left with essential amino acids. You're left with this. You're left with an AMO8. Now, this AMO8, like I said, is 3 times more anabolic than regular essential amino acids. This is because we have a very specific amino acid combination here with higher amounts of leucine and other aminos. So this is actually would be even more preferred than just regular straight essential amino acids. So it's just going to be even better. But that's basically how it works. So proteins, essential, non-essential, get rid of the non-essential, or left with the essential, and that's what AMO8 is. So when you do that math of how every gram of protein is made up of, you're going to see that amount is partially essential amino acids. So hopefully that makes sense. So you don't want to drink just all essential amino acids, though, because there is some evidence that perhaps some of those non-essentials are required through diet. So you want to get the majority of your protein from whole food sources. But this is a very simple, very easy, very efficient way to get in the rest of your protein. If, say, you need 200 grams of protein a day, and you get in 170 from your meat, or your meals, your whole foods, just 2 scoops, and you just throw it in water, and you can sip it in between meals, and it keeps you anabolic. Some people will actually drink essential amino acids all day long. And yes, there is a big difference between branched chain amino acids and essential amino acids. Branched chains are only 3 amino acids, leucine, isoleucine, and valine, whereas an essential amino acid supplement contains those 3 amino acids plus the other 5 amino acids that are needed for muscle growth and overall general health. Now, so here we go. Eric from Supplement King in Prince Edward Island, and all Supplement Kings actually, I think for the most part carry, they certainly carry the animal weight, and if they don't have military weight in, they can bring it in for you. So thanks, Eric. Happy to give you a shout out there. If you're in Charlottetown, drop by and say hi to Eric. All right, so Dana has a question. I put a pin in something, and I can't remember what it was. So if any of you guys can remind me of what I was talking about, just make it in the comment section. I'll pick up that thought. So Dana asks, what's the difference between vegan protein and whey? So we're talking about probably protein powders, vegan protein versus whey protein. So the biggest difference is that it's a good source, and it's actually vegan protein is something that if shakes are very important to you, then I do recommend cycling those vegan protein sources in, just like you would with the rest of your proteins. The only issue with vegan protein is that it doesn't have quite the same amino acid profile as an animal protein does. So they're not quite as anabolic. They're not quite as effective for building muscle mass. However, you could take the animal weight again and add a scoop of that to your vegan protein powder, and it's going to drastically increase the anabolic effect of the vegan protein. And that is one thing that I do recommend to people who are not, who for whatever reason don't want to eat meat, are vegan or vegetarian, and want to still get the most benefit out of their vegan protein, is just to add a little bit of essential amino acids to it, and it will increase the value of the protein, your ability to use it. So Aaron asked, what are the 3 most bioavailable sources of protein? Well, whey protein is probably one of the best. You don't necessarily have to get an isolate either. There are benefits to using a concentrate isolate blend, and actually most of the studies are done with concentrate isolate blends versus isolates. So whey protein is excellent. Eggs are excellent. You can actually find charts on the different bioavailability of proteins. Usually what it means is oh, excuse me, just lost my train of thought there. So bioavailability, folks, for you guys that don't know, means the body's ability to use the protein. So a high percentage of the protein is used as opposed to wasted or whatever. So we got whey, eggs, basically all your good sources of protein are all going to be quite high bioavailability. They're all going to be utilized very efficiently. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. And of course, actually at the very top, it's going to be essential amino acids, which are just free-form amino acids. Those are going to be the most easily and readily used source of protein that you can possibly get. So I hope that answers your question for you. So I don't know if anyone remembers what I was trying to talk about earlier. If I think of it, I will get back to it. But for the moment, I actually can't even remember what I was talking about. Couldn't have been that important. So it doesn't appear that anyone has. Oh, here we go. Thoughts on soy protein? Okay, that's a great question because I actually know somebody that has been using soy protein. I've recommended that they stop as a male. Even as a female, not a good idea to use soy protein. Soy has a high amount of estrogen in it. And now that's soy isolate that we're talking about. The only form of soy that I think is good is like a tofu. Something like that is okay. But when you get into the soy isolates, they tend to have a lot of estrogenic properties to them. So I kind of recommend keeping soy to a minimum. Doesn't mean you have to avoid it altogether and become paranoid of it, but it's certainly something you want to minimize. It's not a protein that I would buy, and I wouldn't cycle a soy protein in with my other protein sources. So I think there's so many sources of protein available that there's a lot better options. Now, if you're vegetarian, like a pea protein is much better than a soy protein. There's hemp. There's a whole bunch of different vegan type protein sources that are much better than soy. So there's no real reason to use soy. It's very inexpensive, and I think that's one of the reasons why people lean towards it. But I would probably not. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Phil. I think it may have been something to do with shakes. Perhaps. I think a lot of people do rely on protein shakes. So I do have a point about shakes, whether it was or not, so thank you. I think a lot of people rely on protein shakes, and I don't think that's really the way to go. You want it to rely heavily on whole food sources and use whey protein shakes as kind of either like a backup. Say you're on the go and you don't have the time, you can use a protein bar or a protein shake. But I think a lot of people do take protein shakes every single day, and I don't think that's a really good idea. Especially, whey, you will develop an intolerance to it if you use the same thing all the time. And maybe that was where I was going with that whole thing is, this is why it's important to cycle to your protein sources, because you don't want to develop intolerances to protein. It's terrible. Trust me, I've been there, and it sucks. And then you can't even eat certain proteins at all. So, yeah, don't rely too heavily on shakes. Now, if you're going to use a whey protein shake, look, protein is neutral, has a pretty neutral flavor. So pick a protein of high quality that's also flavored with stevia. There's no real need to have a sucralose-containing protein. Now, sucralose is great for certain products that are extremely hard to mask the flavor of, but protein's not one of them. So you might as well make the better choice and pick one that has stevia. And there's also no need for any artificial colors or any of that garbage that you see in some proteins. So, make your choices wisely and try to do it as healthily and safely as you possibly can. So I think that's pretty much going to wrap it up because like I mentioned to you guys at the beginning, I have a clinic that I'm taking part in, that I get the opportunity to take part in, which I'm pretty excited about. It's the Ground Zero Clinic over here in Dartmouth. So if you're in the Halifax, Dartmouth area and you're new to competing and you want to see what it's all about, come on over, join us. We are just off Windmill Road. We're in behind the Pita Pit area. There's an event posted on the NSABBA Facebook page as well, which gives directions and everything else, gives a map and all that sort of stuff. So, guys, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it. I'm trying to keep this thing going Sunday, even when I have appointments and things like that. I'm trying to, I'll jump on somewhere, a friend's Wi-Fi, and do this for you guys. So I'm trying to bring you guys as much helpful information as possible. If you know anyone that has questions about protein and would get some sort of benefit out of watching this video, please tag them in it and share it, maybe even share it to their page or your page. And if you have any questions at all, you guys know I do go through the questions. So if I didn't get to yours, I do answer them. And if anyone watches this at a later date and you have a question, put a question in there and I will do my best to answer it. You can also find this video posted later on the Advanced Genetics YouTube channel, and that is there it is. youtube.com/advanced genetics TV. So you can subscribe there. I've got a whole bunch of videos that I posted over the years. Some of them are pretty funny, the ones from many years ago of me training. But there's a lot of good information there, I think, and some good exercise techniques, and et cetera, et cetera. So once again, thank you for joining me. Enjoy your rest of your Sunday, and I will see you guys all again next week. Hoorah!